Hi all, welcome to Piker's Reefs. On today's episode I'm going to walk you through how I get macro shots of some zoas. Okay, so let's get into it. I've got some zoas here from a good friend of mine, Jody, who wants some pictures of these zoas to help her advertise online and sell these frags, because zoas are such a small coral and they've got such intricate details and colours that taking a picture with your phone from up here on the side, particularly under blue lights, it just doesn't really cut it, particularly when you're talking some of the premium zoas where you're asking a few dollars. So Jody's dropped these off to me so that I can set them up in here and get some really good photos of them, and I thought, why not run you guys through the process of what I do to get a really nice macro shot of a zoa so that you can hopefully replicate the process at home. So the first thing is, obviously, the zoas are in the tank. I'll give you a bit of footage of my frag tank here. It's currently empty. There's absolutely nothing fancy about this setup whatsoever. It is literally a fairly dirty 5-foot tank. I've got the zoas on the frag rack that Zoe brought them, that Jody brought them in on. And I've just got the T5s on my frag tank on. Whilst this tank has metal halide T5 and LED lights available, and I know zoas look incredible under LEDs, I find it's easier to get the colour balancing right in post-production if you just shoot under something like metal halide or T5. And being zoas, I don't want to fry them with lights, so I've just got the T5s on. There's literally a white bulb and a blue bulb, nothing special, but it just gives us a pretty white colour to shoot the zoas under. We can tweak the colours a little bit later to get them to match what the eye sees, but that's pretty much the tank. They're just sitting in there. I've got the flow is still on. The flow's just turned down to be a really gentle flow, just to encourage them to open up so I can get a nice clean picture of what the zoa actually looks like. Alright, the next thing I need is my camera. Anyone who's watched my photography series before will know that I love Canon. The only reason why I love Canon is because that's all I've ever used. Whilst I take photos a bit now, particularly in the reef scene, I'm not a photographer. I'm self-taught. Only really picked up a camera a few years ago, and I managed to get a cheap Canon 7D and have upgraded as I've gone along. And now I've got a what do they classify as my dream camera? I know it's a few years old now, and I bought this secondhand, but it's a Canon 5D Mark III. And I've got the lens that is perfect for this job here. It's the, I'm not sure if you can see on there, it's the, oh, it's upside down. The Canon, no, I was right the first time. The Canon Macro 100mm. This is the, you can tell by the red band, it's the f2.8L lens. It's their premium glass. And then just add on to that, you probably see just down the bottom here, I've actually got a little, what are they called, extension tube, just so I can get even closer again than what this lens allows me, because this lens, the closest I can get is, what does it say, 30 centimeters. I want to be able to get closer than that. You notice I've got these zoas up on the top tier of my frag rack. I want to be able to get within probably, I don't know, 20, 15 centimeters of them. So I've just put my small extension tube on there, which will allow me to focus even closer. That extension tube's nothing fancy. I bought that off eBay. I got 3 different lengths, and I think it was about $20 for the set. The next thing I'm going to need is my trusty Avast porthole. If you don't have the specific Avast thing, you can make something. It can be a Ferrero Rocher lid from a chocolate box, can be a glass bowl, can be a bit of Pyrex type Tupperware type deal, anything that's glass and clear that you're going to be able to get to the top. Alternatively, you can just turn off all flow so you get that glass surface on the water. But ideally, if you can get something that gets in under the water surface, you're going to get better pictures. You're going to get less glare off the surface of the water and whatnot. So yeah, let's set up the camera, and then I'll run through some of the settings that I'm taking the pictures with. Alright, so I've got my last porthole set up on the camera, and I've got the camera on. I'm just going to dial in some rough settings to get started. Now, when we're shooting things like zoas with basically little to no tank flow at all, and I've got some nice bracing here that I'm going to be able to rest against, you can turn your shutter speed right down, because you're not shooting a moving subject, and it's going to just make everything a bit brighter in the rest of your settings. So first thing I do is I'll switch over to manual mode. I go to my first setting, which is shutter speed. I'm going to dial that in at 1/50th of a second, which is traditionally really slow, but it's just going to allow us to get really good light in the camera and do what we need to do. Next thing I'm going to look at is the aperture. for really nice dramatic shots and something like Zoa's where we're really only trying to get maybe one polyp in focus, maybe a couple if you got a tile with a few in there, but realistically if you can get one polyp in focus you're going to be looking good. So you want that aperture number to be as low as possible, and on this lens the lowest I can go is f2.8, so that's where I'm going to set it. Your final setting is your ISO, which is basically how much artificial light the camera is going to have to try and make up. And because of our other two settings with a really slow shutter speed, i.e. when you take that picture the shutters are open for longer, letting lots of light in, and then finally the small aperture number, which just to be confusing means that it's got a big hole. So we've got a big hole that's open for a long time, which basically means a lot of light's coming into the camera. Therefore the artificial light enhancement, the ISO, can be set really low. So basically take some pictures and see how they're coming up on your camera. But for this instance, I'm going to be around ISO 100, ISO 200. I'll take a couple of shots and we'll see how they look. The next thing that I will do is you'll notice I'm sort of leaning, I'm bracing the camera against the crown of this tank, and that keeps it super steady when I press the shutter button. And that's really important when I've got such a slow shutter speed, because if I sort of wiggle the camera, when I press the button, if I end up wiggling it a little bit, or if I'm just sort of not holding it all that steady, it's going to give a blurry and out of focus picture. So I like to brace it against the tank. You can set the live view on the back, but I don't know, particularly with the glare from the lights above and that, I still like to put my eye up to the actual viewfinder. So I'll find the subject to focus on. I hold the shutter button down halfway until it gets focused. Once it's got focused, I'll press it in all the way. One other thing you can look at there is, with my Canon here I have set up so I can see the exposure guide on screen. It tells me if the image is going to be underexposed or overexposed, basically how bright or the contrast there. One thing I could do to help really push the colours of these Zoas would be to put them onto a black frag rack. They're on clear frag racks here with a white base, so I'm getting a lot of light coming back up, which is kind of taking away from the colour of the Zoas, but we'll progress to see how we go. If I really aren't happy with the pictures on the computer, I've got a bunch of black frag racks there, I can pop them on and see how that looks. But just going to take a few pictures and see how they look. Alright, taking a few snaps. Got a couple of each, so let's go to the computer and see how they look. Alright, so I've taken the pictures in my fish room. I brought the memory card, popped it in my laptop. I'm at my workstation now, and I'm just going to open up Lightroom, and I'll pick out a couple of random images and just walk you through some of the quick changes I make to make them, not to artificially enhance them, but just to make the colors and the picture look more as it does to the eye. Things like Zoas and well, any coral picture, to be honest, under any sort of aquarium lighting is really difficult to capture on a camera the same way our eye sees it. So we've got to make a little bit of changes in Lightroom just to get the image looking as it should. But yeah, first step is obviously take the memory card out of the camera, pop it in the computer. I use, I think, a little Mac built-in application called Image Capture just to copy the files off the card and pop them in a folder. I created a folder called Zoapic Video, because this is the Zoapic video. And I'm just going to, yeah, let's open up Lightroom and get into it. I'll switch to a screen recording now, so you don't have to look over my shoulder on my screen. Alright, here we are. This is my desktop here, and this is this application I was telling you about that I use to import the images, but more importantly we've got Adobe Lightroom down here. There are other applications you can use to get this job done, but this is a video showing you how I do it, so this is the application I use. It's not to say it's the best, it's not to say it's the worst, it's just what I use. So let's open up Lightroom, and you see I've imported 16 pictures that I've taken of some of these Zoas, so let's have a bit of a scroll through. And straight off the bat, they're not looking too bad. They're pretty decent pictures straight from the camera, but we'll see if we can just make them look a little nicer. That was probably not a bad example to work with, nor is that one. Sorry for some background noise there. Just got some guys deciding to trim trees out in front of my house. Yeah, that's a really cool picture. There's some fairly pale sopranos, but so be it. Some more slightly pale Utter Chaos, I think they are. Alright, maybe we have a look at these last couple of images. We'll start with this one. So you'll notice over on the right hand side here I've got all the settings here which we can play with. first thing I like to do is just adjust the temperature of the color. We're not actually far off there because of the lighting I used in the frag tank. I mean, if you were using LEDs and some other stuff, you might need to bump this right up to like 20K to get the colors right. But we're probably going to be a bit more around 16,000 Kelvin. You can start to see that brings the color much more natural to what we're looking at. So that's a good start. Next thing I like to do is I scroll right to the bottom and I tick these two options here, the remove chromatic aberration and enable profile corrections. If you're not using a lens as good as the 100mm f2.8L, that will actually distort your image a fair bit and bring it back into the realm of where it should be. With the 100, you'll notice the picture barely changes at all, but it's still a good habit to get into. All right, now the next thing I like to do is I do like to crop the images a little bit when we're trying to get pictures of just this zoa. We don't really want other ones creeping in. You don't want to be focused down too hard on that one particular polyp, so I'm just going to go about there. It's starting to look pretty cool. All right. One other thing I'd like to do just to further enhance this image a bit is I like to put a little bit of reverse vignetting on, which basically just makes, if I bring it all the way down, you'll see it sort of brings the black in around it. I just like to take a little bit away from the edges, so we'll go in about there. All right. That's looking good. Now, one more thing I noticed with aquarium photography is we get a little bit of hazing in the image, normally just the light reflecting off either the base of the tank, the sand, things in the water, and there's this really nice little setting here called dehaze. So I like to just put a little bit of dehaze in just to take that sort of whiteness out. That's looking pretty cool. Not too much, because if you go too far, I mean, the picture doesn't look like, the zoas don't look like that. They look more around, you can just see like, obviously you don't want a picture like that, you don't want it looking like milk. We want it, yeah, somewhere around that. Looks pretty cool. All right, if I scroll back up to the top, now that I've made those changes, now's when I like to play with the exposure a little bit. So I just put a little bit more exposure in there, just to make those colors a bit brighter. As a result, by doing that, it's made the egg crate in this picture and this red here in the back a bit too bright. So I'm just going to pull some out of the highlights, which you'll just see it just takes the edge off that egg crate. And I'll do the same with whites. Not too much though. That looks pretty good. And then last but not least, everyone's favorite, the saturation slider. I put that right up to the top. No, I don't, because yeah, as we discussed, that's not what the zoas look like. I bring that back closer to 0, but let's see what, probably around about +7 seems pretty accurate to me. And that image is done. Simple as that. Let's move on to our next one. All right, here's our before picture. We've got some Sakura sunrise here, I believe they are. Apologies if it's not. I'm not a zoa expert. I just try to take pictures of them. So let's just frame that up a little bit. Unfortunately, these two tiles are touching each other, but that's what we've got. Cool. They're a pretty cool looking little zoa. Let's put the color up to where it should be, probably around 16K. Yeah, that looks about accurate. This one does look like it's got a little bit of noise here. Let's just take a little bit of noise off to smooth the image out a bit. All right, turn on those two. Let's dehaze it a little. Whoa, probably not that much. Yeah, that's good. Let's put a little bit of vignetting in to try and take the focus away from those zoas in the background. I'm gonna go a lot of vignetting on this one, why not? All right, let's add a little bit of exposure. Make it a little bit brighter, lovely. Let's take some of the highlights and whites out. Perfect. Color looks good. Everything looks pretty good there. I've already put some noise reduction in. It's still a little bit noisier, depending on where you are in the image. The rest looks okay there. That one's done. Simple as that. All right, this one. Again, I don't know what these are called. Are these hyper rainbows or something? I'm not sure. Let's just make this image a touch smaller. We'll go for that. Unfortunately, these beautiful, I think they're scrambled eggs are right next to it. That's okay. We'll deal with that. Let's put those two settings on. Let's dehaze it a bit. That's enough. Let's get the color up to where it should be. Whoa, 16, 15, that's about it. Let's add some exposure. Let's take some highlights out. Let's take some whites out. Let's remove a bit of noise. About there should work. And let's do my favorite, a little bit of vignetting, just so we can focus in on those zoas. Beautiful. So there's a quick example of just 3 images. I'm going to export those 3. I'm going to have a quick look at some of the other ones I did. Yeah, they're looking cool. They're cool. So it's a similar sort of picture, more of sakuras. Not sure what they are. They're pretty cool though. Yeah, nice. I think they're Fruit Loops or Bam Bams or something like that. There's a nice picture of Sunny D. That'd come up really nice. They're a cool picture too, but let's focus on just exporting these 3. So I'm just going to go to File, Export. What I like to do is pick the folder where they are. So I'll pick video because I imported all my raw images here. So I'm going to choose that, and I'll just put them into a subfolder that I just call JPEG, because obviously you can't share raw images to Facebook or anywhere else like that. So I'll just put them into the JPEGs. Let's resize these down to quality of 70, otherwise the images are massive. And let's add my own little watermark. So let's export those images. See up here it says it's exporting 3 files. I'm running my 9-year-old MacBook laptop here, so it takes a second. Although it should be just about done. Wow, that do take longer than it normally does. Here goes our handy tree lopper. Hopefully he's done for the day. Alright, we'll come down here. So I'll pick video. We'll scroll down and we find our JPEG folder. We've got some pictures around 1 meg each, which is much more Facebook friendly. And yeah, they look pretty cool. So that's how I take Zoa pictures. I'm sure I could spend a lot more time on each image, fine-tuning each individual color and framing the shot a lot better, but for a quick for sale post, that's pretty much the process I take. And if you have any questions, feel free to post them below. If you're new around here, I'd really appreciate if you wanted to subscribe and like the videos. That helps make my progression through YouTube land. Anything other than that, yeah, you can get me in the comments below. Thanks guys, bye.